I stood there staring at the tall metal fence that now completely circled my ranch. A private hoe property. No trespassing sign hung right in the middle of the locked gate. I blinked. My own ranch, fenced, locked, like I was the trespasser. I rattled the gate hard. It didn't budge. I had left for just 2 days to visit my mother in Houston. 2 days, and now someone, or more specifically, the HOA that had been bothering me for months, had decided to fence me out of my own property. Not only that, the only entrance gate had a thick padlock on it. No combination, no spare key, no explanation. Just a smug little sign like it owned the place. But here's the part that will make you spit out your sweet tea. Instead of fighting, yelling, or calling lawyers like they probably expected, I went out and bought the small patch of land. The exact one the gate was built on. The land that held the only gate key. That's right. I bought it. And what happened after that? Oh, you're not ready for it. But let me tell you how we got to that crazy point. My name is Jesse Ray. I'm 43, a retired firefighter, and I live on a 40-acre ranch outside of Austin, Texas. After decades of risking my life to save others, I finally saved enough to buy this peaceful piece of land where I could raise horses, grow peaches, and wake up every morning to silence, except for the birds, of course. For the first year, life was good. No neighbors, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your soul smile. Then came the HOA. Not from my side. No, my ranch didn't belong to any neighborhood. It was its own land, free and clear. But some developer decided to build a fancy new housing estate right next to me. Like right next to me. And those houses fell under a brand new HOA called Pinebrook Meadows. At first, I didn't think much of it. They were the ones moving in next to me, not the other way around. I had fences, signs, and boundary markers. But those HOA folks, they had other ideas. First came the letters. They looked official, but I laughed at them. Stuff like, "Your barn color does not match community standards, and please remove your tractor from visible sightlines." I ignored everyone. Why? Because they had zero power over me. My property wasn't even in their HOA. Then came the visits. This one guy, Mr. Donald Snipe, came by wearing a little name badge and a smug grin. "We're trying to create a beautiful, unified environment," he said. "Your property is very visible from the new homes, and well, the board thinks it clashes with our aesthetic." I asked him if he wanted some fresh horse manure to go with his opinion. He didn't come back after that. But the HOA didn't stop. A few weeks later, I noticed weird surveyor flags near my fence line. Then I started seeing new faces, strangers walking around the property line, taking pictures with clipboards. I asked one of them what they were doing. They mumbled something about boundary reevaluation and rushed off. I had my land checked when I bought it. All the boundaries were clear and legal, but I knew something was brewing. So I visited the county clerk's office just to make sure nothing funny was going on. And while I was there, I got to talking with an older man behind the desk. He told me, "Son, if that HOA's got their eyes on you, they'll try everything. Watch out." He wasn't lying. The next week, I drove out to Houston to check on my mom, who had just gotten out of surgery. I stayed 2 nights to make sure she was good. On the 3rd day, I drove back, and there it was, a shiny, brand-new silver fence with heavy steel mesh that wrapped around my entire property. It wasn't just a border, it was a wall. No warning, no notice, just bam, locked out of my own land. And at the only entrance point was a small 5x5 plot of land, just a sliver that jutted out from the new development. On that tiny piece sat the gate, and according to a fresh post online, that little land had been quietly bought 2 weeks ago by the Pinebrook Meadows HOA. They were smart, I'll give them that. They used a loophole. They didn't touch my property. Instead, they fenced around it using the edge of their new land. They didn't block me illegally. They simply secured their border with me locked inside it. I couldn't even get to the gate without technically stepping onto their land. And because they now owned the land the gate was on, they controlled the only access, the only key, the only path. I was furious. But you know what they say, the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet and smart. That night, I didn't call the cops. I didn't scream online. I did one thing. I called my friend Darnell. He works in real estate, and he owed me big time for helping him rebuild his barn when it caught fire 2 years ago. Darnell, I said, I need you to find out who owns the land under that gate, the exact plot. I want to buy it. He laughed, thought I was joking, but I wasn't. 3 days later, he called me back. You're not going to believe this, he said. The guy who sold that strip to the HOA, he owns another tiny strip right behind it. It connects to the main road. He was planning to sell it later. I didn't even let him finish. I wired the money. The land behind the gate, the only land with the physical access to the gate from the road, now belonged to me. And even better, that land also held the tiny maintenance shed where they had stored the only key to the gate. But I didn't tell them, not yet. I waited until the weekend, the exact day they were holding a fancy HOA family picnic on their clubhouse lawn. I drove right up in my old Dodge truck and parked at the edge of my new property. I stepped out with a giant red "No Trespassing" private property sign under my arm. And just as I was hammering the sign into the dirt, Donald Snipe himself stormed over in his polo shirt and khaki pants. "What do you think you're doing?" he snapped. I smiled. "Just putting up a sign." On my land, his face dropped. "Excuse me." "Yep," I said. "Turns out the land behind your fancy fence, the one with the gate, doesn't belong to you anymore." He froze. "That's not possible." I handed him the deed. "It is now." And then I pulled out the key, the one key that fit the gate, and I slipped it into my pocket with a wink. "Guess I'll see myself into my ranch whenever I feel like it," I said, stepping past him. He stood there, stunned, but he wasn't the only one. The next day, something even crazier happened. Something I did not see coming. It changed everything. And that's when the real chaos began. The next morning, I was sipping coffee on my porch, enjoying the sunrise over the hills, when I noticed a cloud of dust rising from the HOA road. A convoy of SUVs and golf carts was making its way toward the gate. I figured it was just some board members coming to stare at the fence, like they were guarding the walls of Fort Knox, but I was wrong, dead wrong. They didn't stop at the gate. They drove straight onto my land using the side access I now owned like they belonged there. I stepped off the porch, heart thudding. One of the cars parked just inches from my front steps, and out stepped Donald Snipe, flanked by 2 other HOA members and a lady in a business suit. I recognized her from the HOA welcome brochure, Mrs. Beatrice Langford, the Pinebrook Meadows legal counsel. Donald didn't even say hello. He just held up a folder and said, "We need to talk, Mr. Ray." I folded my arms, then talk. Beatrice stepped forward, lips tight like she bit a lemon for breakfast. "You're being served notice. You are in violation of HOA zoning policies and are trespassing on community property." I raised an eyebrow, tassing on my own land. Donald pointed to the fence. "You're inside our enclosure, the community fence." Beatrice opened the folder and pulled out a map. "You see here," she said, tapping it. "Your ranch is now fully contained within Pinebrook Meadows' secured perimeter. As such, we've classified it as internal green space." I stared at her, stunned. "You turned my ranch into a park." "Not officially," Donald said quickly, "yet, but we have submitted a reclassification petition to the county. Once that goes through, you'll be required to follow all HOA guidelines." I nearly choked on my breath. "You're saying you're trying to legally make my land part of your HOA without me agreeing to it?" Donald gave a polite smile. "It's for the good of the community." That was the last straw. I walked to the front of the house, pulled out my phone, and dialed my cousin Travis. He wasn't just family. He was also one of the best land use attorneys in the entire state of Texas. While they stood there smugly, I handed Donald the phone. "Travis Ray, attorney at law," he said on speaker. "You have about 3 seconds to step off my cousin's property before we hit you with criminal trespass, harassment, and civil liability." Donald paused. Beatrice snatched the phone and tried to argue, but Travis didn't back down. He started listing off property codes and citing federal trespass laws. When he mentioned the phrase unlawful land enclosure, Beatrix's mouth snapped shut. They left, but I knew it wouldn't be the last of them. Still, I needed a break from the madness. So, the next day, I decided to drive into town for some supplies, and to clear my head, I stopped by the local diner for a burger and some sweet tea. Halfway through my meal, Sheriff Daniels walked in. He was an old buddy of mine from the fire department days. He sat down, acros, from me without asking. "You really ticked off some powerful people," he said, grinning. "You heard already?" I asked. "Man, it's all over town. HOA board came to the station this morning claiming you're barricading HOA members and planning to start a sovereign ranch state." I laughed. "They're serious?" "Oh, deadly serious. But don't worry," he said, patting my shoulder. "They messed with the wrong Texan. I thought the worst was over. But that night, while I was brushing down the horses in the barn, I heard a strange noise outside, like shovels hitting dirt. I crept out the back, flashlight in hand, and followed the sound to the far north side of the fence. And that's when I saw it. 3 men in reflective vests were digging a trench, not on my land, but right next to it, outside the fence along the strip I had just bought. When I shouted, they froze. One of them dropped a walkie-talkie, and I heard the static buzz of a voice. "Keep digging. We need that secondary access by sunrise." They were building a new entrance, a secret one. I ran back to the house, called Travis again, and grabbed my drone. I launched it into the sky, recorded everything: the digging, the workers, the makeshift blueprints laid out on a folding table, and just as I was zooming in on one of the maps, a spotlight hit the drone. Then came the sound of a rifle bolt snapping into place. They were armed on HOA business. Before I could react, someone fired a warning shot. Bang! Into the air. My drone tumbled out of the sky and crashed to the ground. I dropped flat behind a hay bale, heart pounding. Who were these people? I waited in the dark for an hour before sneaking out to recover the drone. The camera was busted, but I had already saved the footage to my cloud. The next morning, I sent the footage to Travis and to Sheriff Daniels. But what happened later that afternoon nearly made me question my sanity. I returned from the feed store to find my ranch's main road blocked by a construction crew. They weren't digging, they were paving. Fresh black asphalt, bright yellow lines, and a big sign that read, "Coming soon. Pinebrook Meadows North Entrance, Private HOA Road." And at the bottom, "Property of Pinebrook Meadows, permitted traffic only." They were building a road through my land, without notice, without permission, without shame. And it got worse because I spotted someone in the distance watching from behind the new fence line. Beatrice holding a clipboard and smiling. They thought they had me surrounded, thought they could pave over my land and push me out slowly. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just Jesse Ray. I was the guy with the only gate key, and they had just paved their future straight into the palm of my hand. What I did next would set off a chain of events that neither the HOA nor their fancy lawyers were ready for. By the time the sun came up the next day, I was already dressed, boots laced, hat on, and leaning on my porch railing with a cup of hot black coffee. That new road was stretching right up to the gate now, like a long black tongue, trying to taste what didn't belong to them. Pinebrook Meadows thought they were closing in, but I had plans, big ones. I called a county zoning inspector first thing in the morning. An old contact I helped rescue during a barn fire years ago. His name was Barry McDougal. Honest guy, thick accent, always wore a bolo tie. When I explained what was going on, he whistled so hard it nearly blew my speaker. "They built a road without a permit," he said, "and through your property. Not only that," I told him, "they fired a shot to take down my drone. I'll be there by noon," he said. And he was. Barry showed up in a dusty blue pickup, chewing sunflower seeds, and holding a clipboard thicker than a Bible. He walked that road inch by inch, took pictures, jotted notes, scratched his head, took more pictures. By the time he was done, he looked mad. "They're going to need more than fancy lawyers to get out of this," he muttered. Just as we were talking, a Pinebrook Meadows security patrol rolled up in a shiny black golf cart. 2 men in navy polos stepped out. Sunglasses, earpieces, the whole deal. One even had a fake badge clipped to his belt. Barry squinted. "What's this?" "HOA Secret Service." The taller one walked up, puffed out his chest. "You're on Pinebrook Meadows, private development land. You'll need to vacate." Barry laughed so hard he bent over. "Son, I work for Travis County. You see this badge?" He flashed it like lightning. "You just told a government inspector to vacate private ranch land that was illegally paved over by your little country club, HOA. That shut them up fast. Barry ordered the road work shut down immediately. Said the next move would come from the county commission, fines, legal action, and possibly jail time for unauthorized land use. The golf cart patrol rolled off quietly, but the quiet didn't last. That night, someone broke into my barn. I had installed cameras after the fence stunt, so I caught them clear as daylight. Two masked men in dark hoodies sprang something flammable onto my hay bales. One carried a red jerry can, the other a lighter. I called 911 before they could strike the flame. By the time the sheriff's deputies arrived, the men were long gone, but the security footage told the whole story. When Sheriff Daniels reviewed it, he cursed under his breath. They wanted your barn to burn, make you look careless, maybe get you evicted. Insurance mess, public outrage. I knew exactly who they were. The next morning, I printed every frame of the video and nailed it to the front fence. Big bold letters on top. Try again. I don't miss. The HOA didn't respond directly, but I knew they were watching. A white drone hovered near my porch for nearly 30 minutes that afternoon, buzzing like a mosquito. I hit it with a slingshot. That evening I paid a visit to the old man who had sold me the land near the gate, Mr. Ernest Walker. Lived in a shack just outside town, but sharp as a whip. He used to own all the land that now made up Pine Brook Meadows, sold it off bit by bit over the years. We sat on his porch drinking iced tea and talking about the good old days. You know, he said, peering over his glasses, I still own a few surprise pieces here and there. The developers didn't pay attention. My ears perked up. Surprise pieces? He nodded. Little strips a few feet wide, but legal. Right through the middle of their walking trails, their rec center driveway, even under their fancy HOA fountain. I almost dropped my glass. You're saying you own the land under some of their features? He grinned. You bet I do. And I was thinking about selling them to me. I asked. He winked. 2 days later, the paperwork was done. I now legally owned a narrow path just 6 feet wide that ran directly across the only parking lot in front of Pine Brook Meadows HOA clubhouse. I didn't block anything yet. Not yet. I just posted a tiny wooden sign in the middle of the lot. Private property. Cross at your own risk under surveillance. It was enough. That same day, Donald Snipe stormed up to my gate again, but this time he was shaking a court document. This is an injunction, he yelled. You can't block access. You're endangering our community. I leaned on the fence and smiled. Who blocked who first, Donald? He sputtered, face red as a chili pepper. This isn't over. I know, I said. That's what makes it fun. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. The HOA filed an emergency motion with the county court to seize temporary control of my land, citing public nuisance, safety violations, and non-compliance with community standards. They were trying to get court-ordered access through my ranch. And the court date, it was set for next week. I needed help, real help. So, I called in a favor from someone Pine Brook Meadows didn't know I had on speed dial. Senator Bobby Lane, old friend. I once pulled him out of a car wreck before the fire spread. He never forgot it. I told him everything. The fence, the break in the road, the court date. He listened quietly, then said, I'll take care of it, but Jesse, be ready. These people play dirty. These people play dirty. You haven't seen the worst of it yet. He was right, because the next day I woke up to the sound of a bulldozer rumbling outside, and when I looked out my window, it was driving straight toward my porch. The bulldozer rolled forward like a metal beast. Slow but sure, its engine growling louder with each foot it crossed. Dust kicked up in thick clouds as the massive blade lowered toward the ground toward my porch. I dashed out the front door barefoot, yelling, Hey, hey, back that thing up. The driver didn't flinch. He just kept inching closer, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. I could barely hear his voice over the roar of the engine, but what I caught made my blood run cold. Just doing what the paperwork says. Paperwork? I waved my arms wildly. Turn it off right now. But he didn't. That's when I heard the sirens. Sheriff Daniels' squad car came tearing down the gravel road like a bat out of hell. Lights flashing, tires spitting rocks. He slammed on the brakes and jumped out before the engine even stopped. Cut the engine, he shouted, one hand hovering over his holster. The bulldozer hesitated, then hissed to a stop. Daniels marched up to the machine, face hard. Who sent you? The driver handed him a folded sheet of paper. Daniels opened it and scanned quickly. His eyes narrowed. "They forged this. Hitch," he said flatly. I took a step closer. "What?" He handed it to me. It looked official. A temporary construction right-of-way permit stamped with a fake county seal. It even had a phony signature from a zoning officer I knew personally. "They're getting desperate," Daniels muttered. "This is felony-level fraud." He called it in, took statements, and impounded the bulldozer right there on the spot. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt hunted because this was no longer about fences or gate keys. This was war. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my porch with a shotgun across my lap, and my dog, Ranger, at my feet. I scanned the terrain every 10 minutes. My land had always been my peace, my slice of heaven. Now it felt like a battlefield. The next morning I called Travis and told him everything. He told me to stay calm, that the court case was still days away, and they were clearly trying to rattle me into reacting. "I need to rattle them." I said I want them exposed, and that's when I came up with the plan. It started with the footage. I had recordings from my drone before it was shot down, security cam videos from the break-in, photos from Barry's inspection, documents showing the land sales, even the fake permit Daniels confiscated, but I needed people to see it. So I sent everything to a local news reporter named Allison Price. Allison wasn't just any reporter. She was known for exposing corruption, and she had a massive online following. She called me the next day. "I saw everything, Mr. Ray. This is unbelievable. Can I come out to the ranch?" I said yes. She brought a cameraman. They spent hours walking the fence, filming the blocked gate, the makeshift road, the phony construction, the security patrols. I told her everything, and I held nothing back. The segment aired that night at 6 p.m. The headline, "HOA Gone Rogue, Veteran Rancher Fights Back Against Land Grab Scandal." It exploded. Within 24 hours, the footage had over 3 million views online. People from all over the country flooded the HOA's website with angry comments. The Pine Brook Meadows office phone lines jammed. Their social media pages were taken down. Local protesters started gathering outside the HOA clubhouse holding signs that read, "Leave Jesse alone," and "Freedom isn't fenced." I thought that would finally calm things down, but I underestimated how far desperation could push people. 3 days before the court hearing, I received an official letter from a local bank. It said my mortgage was being foreclosed for missed payments. I nearly blacked out. I had no mortgage. I bought my land outright with cash years ago. I owned every acre. I drove straight to the bank. The lady at the desk looked confused. "Mr. Proved."
"Mr. Paid, job, straight. Stu, the bank." The lady at the desk looked confused. "Mr.
Ray," it says. Here the foreclosure is being pushed by Pine Brook Meadows HOA under delinquent assessments and infrastructure fines. "What assessments?" I asked, voice shaking. She blinked. "Looks like $17,000. I stared at the number. $17,000 for what? She hesitated. "Apparently they've billed you for excessive fence shadow encroachment, unapproved animals. They listed your horses as unauthorized equine units, and sunlight reflection off your barn roof." I laughed loud and bitter. This was insane. Travis called an emergency meeting with the judge assigned to our case and showed her the fake bills. The judge issued a cease and desist against Pine Brook Meadows, freezing all further legal action until the hearing. That bought us time, but they weren't done. 2 nights before court, my power went out, and not from a storm. Someone had cut the main line cleanly, just behind the barn, right where it met the county pole. Ranger had barked like mad, but whoever did it was gone by the time I grabbed a flashlight. No lights, no heat, no security cams. They wanted me vulnerable, but I would bury. Asn't the same man I was months ago. I had learned. I had grown. Meaner, smarter, quieter. I pulled out my generator, lit candles, sat quietly in the dark with my notepad, because I wasn't thinking about how to stop them anymore. I was thinking about how to finish this, and I knew just where to strike next. Because Pine Brook Meadows had one weakness they didn't realize I'd found. Their entire HOA office building, their headquarters, sat on land they didn't own. It was one of Mr. Walker's forgotten pieces, and guess who held the deed now? Me. So, at sunrise the day before court, I nailed my own eviction notice to their front door. The HOA headquarters sat there in all its fake glory. Fancy glass doors, marble signs, and flags waving like they ran a government. But that morning, I walked up the front steps in my old boots, cowboy hat tilted low, and slapped that eviction notice on the main entrance with a hammer so loud the sound echoed across the parking lot. It read, "Official notice, you are trespassing on private property. Cease operations immediately. Owner Jesse Ray." People inside stared from behind the glass like they'd seen a ghost. I turned and walked away slow, letting the cameras from the local news crew catch every step. Allison Price was back front and center filming it all. She whispered to her cameraman, "We're going live in 5-4. Right on cue, Donald Snipe burst through the doors in a full suit, sweat already soaking through the armpits. "What the hell is this?" he barked, yanking the notice off the door. I didn't even stop walking. I just said, "Read the fine print, Donald. You built your little empire on land you don't own." He shouted after me, "This won't hold up in court." "Oh, I'm counting on it," I muttered with a grin. That clip, it went viral before I even got home. People all over the country were eating it up. Farmers, veterans, ranchers, even folks in big cities were rooting for me. Now my inbox filled with support. Donations poured in from strangers. A GoFundMe, someone else started past $100,000 in 12 hours. But all that attention lit a fire under the HOA, and they responded exactly how I expected, with panic. That evening, someone tried to serve me another court order. This one said I was illegally impeding essential HOA operations and deliberately obstructing a legally chartered civil organization. It was nonsense. Travis read the document and laughed. "This one's written like it was drafted by a middle schooler with a thesaurus." Still, we knew they were spiraling, and that made them dangerous. The night before the court hearing, I stayed up reviewing everything one last time. Documents, video footage, timelines, property deeds, sale receipts, fake bills, the drone footage, the bulldozer incident, all of it. At 2 a.m., while Ranger slept at my feet, I heard a crunch outside, boots on gravel. I slipped on my coat, grabbed the shotgun, and flicked off the lights. I crept to the front door and peeked out the window. A figure was standing at the gate alone, hands in the air. I stepped out onto the porch, weapon ready. "Say something," I called. "It's me, Beatrix Langford." I froze. The HOA's lawyer. She stood in the moonlight, looking smaller, tired, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy, her heels dusty, and her voice cracked when she spoke. "I need to talk alone, please." I didn't trust her, but I listened. She stepped closer, stopping just inside the light. "I'm not here on behalf of Pinebrook Meadows. I'm here because I'm done." She reached into her coat, slow, careful, and pulled out a flash drive. "This has everything," she said. "Internal memos, emails, proof. They planned the road scam, the fake foreclosure documents, even instructions to destroy your barn." I didn't move. "They went too far," she whispered. "I didn't sign up for this. I took the drive." She nodded once, turned, and walked back into the darkness. The next morning I entered the courtroom with Travis at my side, and Ranger waiting outside with a friend. The judge, a sharp older woman named Judge Carol Ames, called us to order. On the left side of the courtroom sat Donald Snipe, 3 lawyers, and a whole table full of binders, printed photos, and red-faced HOA board members. On the right, just me and Travis. The judge looked over the documents for 5 minutes before raising an eyebrow. "Mr. Ray," she said, "are you prepared to present your defense?" Travis stood. "Your Honor, we're not here to defend. We're here to expose." And that's what we did. We showed the fake documents, the illegal fence, the bulldozer stunt, the fire attempt, the power sabotage, and the phony court filings. Then came the bombshell. Travis handed the flash drive to the court clerk. This was provided anonymously. It contains internal HOA communications outlining a long-term strategy to acquire Mr. Ray's land using coercion, harassment, and illegal tactics. The courtroom was silent. The judge clicked her pen 3 times, then leaned forward. "And the land under their headquarters belongs to my client," Travis said. legally purchased and recorded 2 weeks ago. The HOA's lawyer tried to object, but the judge shut her down. By the end of the hearing, Judge Ames leaned back and said, "I have seen some shady behavior in my time, but what I've heard today is an organized attempt to violate a citizen's rights." She ruled in my favor on every count. Not only did she dismiss all claims against me, she fined Pinebrook Meadows $500,000 in damages and ordered a full investigation into the HOA board. But that wasn't the biggest shock. 2 hours later, the entire board, including Donald Snipe, was escorted out of the Pinebrook Meadow, was officed by county deputies, handcuffed, every single one, and I stood at the gate with Ranger, watching as they were driven away, but I wasn't smiling. Not because I wasn't satisfied, but because I had one final card to play. The land behind the new road they paved. Remember that little strip that ran behind their development? I had just bought that too, and I had plans for it that would forever remind Pinebrook Meadows what happens when you try to fence in a man like me. Because tomorrow at sunrise, construction crews were coming in, and what I was about to build there wasn't a fence. It was a surprise so sweet, so bold, it would make national headlines. At exactly 6:45 a.m., the rumble of engines echoed across the sleepy rooftops of Pinebrook Meadows. The residents peeked out of their curtain-covered windows, expecting another HOA project, maybe a gazebo, maybe another path through my stolen fence line. But what they saw, they weren't ready. 4 flatted trucks rolled in, followed by a bulldozer, an excavator, and a long trailer painted red, white, and blue. On the side in bold letters, it read, "Freedom Arena, coming soon. Grand opening by Jesse Ray."
That's right. Freedom Arena coming soon. Grand opening by Jesse Ray. That's right.
I was building a rodeo arena right behind their development on the strip of land they had tried to steal. The one they paved next to, the one they thought would become their HOA's crown jewel entrance. Instead, it was about to become my stage. I had spent the last week making quiet calls, friends from my firefighter days, ranch hands I knew from county fairs, a couple of retired veterans who ran youth programs, and even a local high school marching band. They all came that morning. By 8 a.m., the first posts were going into the ground. My crew worked fast. I'd hired real builders, and as they drilled and framed the main gate arch, I stood off to the side with a coffee in hand, watching Pinebrook Meadows residents gather in clumps near their fancy new sidewalk, jaws slack, slippers on, bathrobes barely tied. One of them, a guy named Craig, I remembered him from the beautification committee, finally stomped across the property line. "You can't do this," he yelled. I didn't look at him. "This is private property," I said calmly. "You're trespassing. This is a residential neighborhood," he cried. I finally turned to him and said, "It's about to get a little louder than neighbor." He fumed. "You're going to bring horses and people and crowds." "Yep," I said. "Every weekend, rodeo on Saturdays, line dancing on Fridays, veterans cookouts, and once a month, goat yoga." He nearly fainted. By noon, Allison Price from the news station was back, broadcasting live from the construction site. Her microphone caught kids cheering as the archway sign was lifted into place. Freedom Arena, owned operated by Jesse Ray. She looked into the camera with that signature smile and said, "Looks like the only gate key that matters now belongs to the man with the arena." That night, I hosted a soft opening. Nothing big, just a community barbecue. But this time, the community wasn't HOA board members and button-downs and clipboards. It was real folks, ranchers, teachers, veterans, single moms, kids with toy lassos. The sheriff showed up with his band. Even Barry McDougal, the zoning inspector, danced with a schoolteacher under a string of porch lights. And me, I just grilled burgers with rangers sitting at my feet and country music humming low from the speakers. I didn't need to say anything. The smell of barbecue, the sound of laughter, and the view of the broken fence line in the background said everything. Pinebrook Meadows never recovered. After the arrest of the board, a state investigation exposed shady land deals tied to their developers. Several resigned. Some homes went up for sale within weeks. Others simply learned to live next to the beat of the rodeo drums. They never rebuilt the gate. They couldn't, because the land under it's still mine. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail from the new acting HOA president, a young lady named Emily. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Ray, we sincerely apologize for what was done to you by our former board. We hope you'll consider joining our quarterly town events in the future. Your arena has brought joy to the children and laughter back to our quiet little neighborhood. Thank you for reminding us what community is really about." I smiled and tucked the letter into a drawer. I never wrote back. I didn't need to, because sometimes the best way to win isn't through courts or yelling. It's by building something stronger, something joyful, right in the heart of your enemy's ambition. And in the end, the man they tried to fence in was the only one free.